It's 7:25 and we're back here on the Thursday, August 18th edition of Morning Barbados. We've had our news, our sports, our regular shout out. We're missing Colin's deep booming voice, but he'll be back to do that very shortly. We've said happy birthday to Sergeant Stewart Johnson, who will give us one more traffic update for the morning. Now it's back to the nitty gritty, the talk of the implications of the budget and its reply. We have our financial consultant Jeremy Stephen, who is with us. Before the break, Jeremy, we were talking about the time frames, the fact that we're kind of already in a medium-term fiscal strategy, and we were figuring out where the proposals laid out by this budget, where they fit in that timeline. And you talked about the fact that the so-called middle class and their ability to weather the storm were seen as being able to handle it a little bit longer, hence why there are not as many concessions or as much of an enabling environment for them as there were before. Do you want to carry on that point? Because that was, that kind of piqued my interest.
That's not a problem. So the belief is, however, on our side of the fence, not government side, but the private sector side, that the middle class is struggling. Again, you've got the constantly rising high cost of living in Barbados, and that's always a worry for most people who would ideally be planning their expenditures. Even if they don't write it on paper, you know when you want to float to New York, at the very least. So a lot of people have had to change their consumption patterns remarkably, and the hope was, although it was said, that some relief would happen in this budget, or some relief would happen within a year or so if government was able to correct itself from last November. However, though the economy was said, and that's up to argument, okay, up to debate actually, it was said to have grown by 2%, and you were, well, not you, but the government was very hopeful that something would happen in December, all right, something would happen in this winter season. The thought is that the middle class could hardly bear to wait any longer. So for me, I thought that they would have wanted to focus a bit more in terms of offering relief. But there was relief in this budget for people, but it was a matter of realizing what it was. Again, if you invest in alternative energy, that's a tax break, $10,000. There's also another relief that a lot of people didn't even notice, the separation of employment income versus business income. A lot of people were offsetting their losses against their employment income when they were doing a part-time job or something. So this is now encouraging you as part-time entrepreneurs to go out there and incorporate your businesses, and then you can go on to a lower tax bracket, 25% constant for any money you've made extra. To me, I think that's a good cost saving as opposed to adding that. Yes, you were offsetting your losses, but ideally, if you don't want to be subject to audit sometime in the future, and let's say you made $100,000 split equally amongst your business and your private employment income, 50-50, 50 grand, 50 grand, you have 50 grand that it will be subject to 25% versus the other 50 grand from your employment income, which might be subject to, I think it's higher than the 25%, somewhere around 30, between 27% and 30%. So, and you can actually claim your expenses if you incorporate on the business side. So I'm thinking that that is also a form of relief, and you can easily claim losses if you're acting under a corporation. Right?
But this is businesses that have been incorporated. That's the thing.
No, it's not businesses. Incorporate? I'm saying that for those private practitioners, those people that just got business names, for instance.
Right.
This is not the chance for you to go and incorporate and claim your losses much more easily. So to me, that is a form of relief, especially if you generate a sizable amount of business activity on the side.
Yeah.
It's much more easier because I think going forward you're going to be more scrutinized, and I think that's a form of relief going forward. Right. And a lot of people did not notice that. So I'm thankful, at least very, very thankful, that that was actually noticed by government.
There's some other things in there. This is a technological kind of world, and there are some other good little things in there.
So for all you computer geeks like me, it's time to start importing those parts. You know, years ago, well, not years ago, up to very recently, importing a huge monitor was a problem because there was always a challenge of whether it was a TV or not. You had to prove this thing was not for a TV. But no, it's much easier. You don't have VAT or import duties on computer parts. Whilst before, if you imported, let's say, a hard drive, you had to pay a duty on it. You had to pay a VAT on that, as opposed to an entire computer, which was basically tax-free on importation, okay? So the hope is that that would drive a lot more computer or technological innovation going forward. That's the hope. I don't personally own any computer businesses, but I do know that that would help the cultural industries immensely, especially those people who have music studios and they run most of music and television, well, media outfits. and they run most of their operations via a computer. So going forward, I think that would be a nice sense of relief as well. That's a good relief.
What do you say to people who are in agreement with Dr. Francis about the fact that this budget glossed over the meat and potato issues, stimulating revenue and offering tax breaks for energy efficient operations and retrofitting tax breaks on computer parts? Doesn't change the fact that we continue to be tied to a fluctuating cost of oil almost on a weekly basis. It doesn't change the fact that the VAT on the basic basket of goods has not gone anywhere and is unlikely to, and that the entertainment and travel allowances of have not been reinstated.
All right, so I'll throw this challenge out to Barbados, and especially those who sympathize with what Dr. Francis was saying. Not necessarily in agreement, but sympathize with it. Now, this budget did not do some things. I'll put that out there. It did not do some things. The fact was, yes, the allowances were not allowed back, certain tax breaks were not allowed back, and that means, yes, you're looking at maintaining your revenue. VAT wasn't reduced back to the once beloved 15%. And
that was hated too.
Well, yeah, for a point. For a point, I remember 2 years to be exact until people became accustomed to it. Right. But we weren't in the middle of these times. The government was really looking to raise some revenue at that point, and the country was doing quite well at that point, right? But the fact was, it's obvious that they are not going to look to reduce their revenues. I agree with you on that front, Dr. Francis. But the thing is, they're also looking to do a lot more capital expenditure going forward, and they're offering a lot of tax breaks, considering their position. Another thing that I think we should very much be careful about, and a lot of people haven't commentated on it, is the fact that the government said that they're going to raise their domestic borrowings, and they're going to allow probably commercial banks, that's my hope, to roll over their investments going forward. So there's this feeling, I was there to watch the budget in Parliament, so there's this feeling that the government perceives that their strategy going forward is going to basically hurt their cash flow even more. That is, I'm throwing that out there. Basically, because if you're saying that you're still going to raise the domestic borrowings and you're going to allow 200 million of the billion that you're looking to borrow to roll over, meaning that you're not giving back that investment when it's due, all right, when it's matured. You're telling these bondholders are of $200 million worth that you're going to ask them to, withhold from taking it out. It makes me think that the government is taking on a bit of a risk at this point just to finance central government and to finance capital expenditure. So it leads me to think that most of these promises without timelines were meant to protect their current position and also to just satisfy the majority of people. Remember, this recession is going to be driven by business, and that's their thought as well. So they offered as much concessions as they can towards business, towards alternative energy, which is going to, in effect, within the immediate term, lower our cost of living, as we have that high dependency on oil.
In theory.
In theory. Because you never know how it's implemented. That's the next, well, not beef, but the next issue I have with the budget. There was hardly any certainty, so I think that they did look at everything from the higher level. They glossed over it. In a sense, that's where I agree with Dr. Francis. I think more time should have been spent on it, but we needed it, all right? We needed to hear what their thoughts were going forward. The fiscal year ends in April. I don't know when elections are due, really, because that's up to them.
And that's what I was thinking, Cassandra. There's this medium-term planning, but right in the middle of there somewhere is going to be election mode.
The political scientist, Peter Wickham, will probably keep us,
abreast of.
He'll keep us abreast with when that's looking. The prediction for that, we'll examine that more with him. But certainly, you've mentioned a number of things and the way we proceed. So, in closing, Jeremy, and wrapping up, what do you want Barbadians, the average Barbadian, the middle-class Barbadian, who, as you mentioned earlier, would seem to be affected most, what do you want them to keep in mind?
Well, government has actually been very lenient for those who have been, high in arrears, really, at this point, VAT and whatnot. You've been given the chance to do 100% waiver up to the end of this year. Please, please, please utilize that. That's a big debt forgiveness as far as I'm concerned. For those who have built illegal structures, if you're middle class or lower class, by all means, try to make sure your legal structures are, that you notify government about them before September 1st. Anything built thereafter, you will have a bunch of trouble. Generally, there's a lot of relief in terms of land tax as well. They changed the bands. But, as I said in the beginning, as much relief that could have been offered that we were hoping for was not, and we would just have to wait to the next budget. I do sympathize with most people. It does affect me as well. It does affect every one of us, and we just need to hold straight and understand our government's position, and they want to maintain the stability not only of our dollar, but our credibility internationally. And that's all. I have to close by saying that much.
All right, well, can you also add, do you have any figures in terms of the top of the scale, bottom of the scale for the middle class that we keep mentioning?
That's done by taxes. Those people that actually pay income taxes over the amount of $25,000, that earn over $25,000 a year and under $100,000 a year. That constitutes the Barbadian middle class by a rough definition. So for those individuals, you're not going to be given that much tax relief, but you have to be creative. I mean, try to retrofit your house. It might be expensive, but the cost savings over 8 years are considerable, and you are given tax relief for importing these things. So if you import piece by piece by piece every year, $10,000 worth of equipment, and you don't need it right away, you can be given it much.
It's a good investment. You can't go wrong with that kind of an investment.
But you really need some more definitives, though, some more definites.
Okay. Yeah. Well, we've picked apart the budget as only you can, and we're a little bit more comfortable in understanding, even if not in the implications for those of us on the ground who still have to live with it. But once again, we thank you for breaking it all down for us. Remember,
price of everything.
The price of everything, even sitting and listening to the nitty-gritty of our budgetary and financial proposals. It is the kind of time where we take a very short break. Remember, if you have any further questions on the budget, send us a message on Twitter or Facebook or email us, and we'll pass them on to Jeremy. Now it's time to talk about something that we were discussing last week with Colin and myself, and Gyson Mears, our lawyer on the line, the legal side of protests. We'll be right back.